Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. We are back. We are probably posting obviously, this podcast is going to come a little bit late because we have COVID.
You still have a little bit.
I still have a little bit of COVID. I think it's COVID.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I brought it to you.
Yeah.
So sorry for that.
All good. I'm just happy to be doing better now and happy to be talking to the audience members who always comes out here and listens to the podcast. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
And I hope you're enjoying it.
Oh, of course. So today we're going to be talking about Mikiko Kasahara's death, which is a very strange case of very apparent foul play. I would even say pretty clear-cut murder of a foreign exchange student from Japan who was murdered in 2002 in Seguin, Texas. And up to this day, 22 years later, we still don't know who is responsible for Mikiko Kasahara's death. Rain, walk us through the details of this dreadful situation.
Of course. Let's begin this case by getting to know Mikiko a little bit. So, Mikiko Kasahara, she was the eldest of two daughters, and she came all the way from Japan. She embarked on a solo journey to the United States as a foreign exchange student, enrolling at Texas Lutheran University in Seguin, Texas. For those unfamiliar, Seguin is a smaller city of 33,000 people today and is about 50 miles south of Austin and 35.9 miles away from San Antonio. So in the middle of those two massive cities.
Yeah.
And Texas Lutheran University, or TLU, it's a private Lutheran university there in Seguin, Texas, and was only 0.4 miles away from Mikiko, or from where Mikiko was temporarily living at that time.
She was living in these, what were they called again? I forgot. The
Terrace apartments.
Terrace apartments in Seguin.
I think it's already assigned to her, maybe before she even went to the US. You know, one of those packages like study abroad or study in the US, so we offer free accommodation.
Yeah, I took a look at these apartments actually. Mm-hmm. So to paint a picture here, we are looking at a group of 6 buildings all together, laid out in 2 rows. So 3 buildings per row.
Is it like rooms? 6 rooms all together? Or...
No, it's buildings.
Oh, all right. Interesting.
I think I have a satellite image of the terrace apartments in Seguin. And I was not able to determine which of these in which of these buildings Mikiko was staying at the time of her murder. I was actually trying to look at if one of these buildings had fire damage, because we know that,
we know it had.
Yeah, we know it had at one point, but since it happened in 2002, when you look at the street view right now, it's basically impossible to tell which one of these had sustained fire damage. Also, I do not know the layout of these apartments, and why we're talking about them so much is because I think it's important. It's important to the case because I think we have to think about how the culprit was able to access the apartments and things of that nature. But you're basically saying that these apartments were very close to her university.
Yeah. I mean, a 2-minute drive. You probably don't even need to drive it.
I don't think there's a 2-minute drive.
It's from Google Maps. A 2-minute drive away from...
I mean, you're crazy if you're doing a 2-minute drive.
TLU.
Only in America.
There are two ways to go to TLU from Sunset Terrace apartments. One is a 0.3 mile route, and the other is 0.4.
So it's pretty close.
Really close. Just right around the corner. So anyways, going back to the main story, by January of 2002, Mikiko was 21 years old at that time, and she was a full-time foreign exchange student, and she was studying English and even excelling in her classes. She was even in the dean's list, which is like a list of the people on top of the class or performing very well in the class during her freshman year. And her friends and people who knew her described her as quick to adapt in new environments and new places. And she was also reportedly really friendly and had this ability to make friends effortlessly. Very likable individual. And the events leading up to her death began on the next night, on December 13th of 2002. Mikiko apparently hosted a small gathering, a small party, at her apartment to celebrate the end of the fall semester before they all pack their bags and leave for the holidays. The party was apparently a success, but nothing out of the ordinary, nothing to report. No one even reported it outside, like the neighbors and all. So it wasn't rowdy, it was just a regular gathering. Small event. And it apparently ended somewhere around 4:30 to 5 in the morning, with the last guest leaving around that time. So let's talk about a little bit of that, the timeline I meant. The party ended at 4:30 and 5 a.m. on a December. Most likely, not even a drop of sunlight. Completely dark, I'm assuming. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it was probably dark. December, 5 a.m., Texas. I think it's still dark.
Pretty much, right?
Do we know who was at the party?
No, apparently just her close friends that she personally invited to.
Do you think it was mostly other foreigners? Or do you think there were also local people from Seguin?
I think it could be a mixture of both. I do think it's mainly just students. I don't know, I have this assumption that it was mainly just students that Mikiko met and befriended with during the fall semester, maybe even the prior semesters.
I guess we can't know for sure.
Of course, yeah.
Information is quite scarce about Mikiko's case. I also was trying to find out who exactly went to the party, because I do think that people at the party should be considered persons of interest for obvious reasons. But I wasn't able to find any information online about who exactly went to the party. I do assume that there was a good portion of like foreigners from Asia.
Yeah, for sure. Although the information is very limited in this case, right?
Very limited. There was at the most 5 articles.
Yeah, but you did mention earlier something about that you read somewhere that there were 5 binders kept by the police or something.
Oh yeah,
never made public.
So law enforcement, they definitely have some information. I've seen an article that claimed that law enforcement had up to 5 big binders of information about the case. So obviously a lot of the things that we're talking about right now is just pure speculation that we can basically, the information that we ascertained from just a handful of online articles and our own, I guess, creative digging around to find more clues. I guess a lot of this information is just guesswork from our part, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's true. Although I'm now fully assuming that everyone who went to Mikiko's party at the night she got murdered, all of the names are probably in one of those big binders.
Of course.
For sure, right?
Of course.
Yeah, but there are no names that were ever mentioned.
No names.
Publicly. Yeah. Okay, so going back to the main story, just a few hours later, at around 8 a.m. So probably it was already light, early morning.
Yeah.
Of the next day, December 14th, the firefighters were called to the Sunset Terrace apartments, Mikiko's room specifically, with reports of a building on fire. It was, as I mentioned, Mikiko's apartment engulfed in flames, fully. And then firefighters managed to extinguish the fire, and they discovered Mikiko's charred remains in her room. An autopsy was actually conducted, and it was revealed that there were no traces of drugs or alcohol in Mikiko's system. So we all knew she was sober at that time she got murdered.
Yeah.
Potentially.
Seems like.
And Travis County Medical Examiner stated that Mikiko died of homicidal violence, including, but not limited to, strangulation. Mikiko apparently had a broken larynx and an unknown pelvic injury from hemorrhaging. Intense heat of the fire made it impossible to determine the exact source of her pelvic injuries. So, forensic specialists were actually convinced that whoever killed Mikiko put so much pressure on her neck that he broke her thyroid bone, or somewhere around her chest, at the joint. So there was so much force. I wonder why, though. Is it anger? Like, what's the nature of it? I mean, it's obvious that it came from a sexual nature.
I think that was just something that they did in order to murder Mikiko. That's my understanding. They just chose to strangle Mikiko. And they were, the person applied a lot of force and caused those injuries to the...
Just to get rid of her.
Yeah, just to kill her.
Pretty terrible.
Yeah, it's terrible. I agree.
Yeah, so they also determined that her pelvis area suffered major injuries. Her pelvic ring was fractured or broken, and it could have damaged the kidneys, the bladder, the stuff down there, and may have caused internal bleeding. And now, it was unknown when the fire started, but it's obvious. It's so obvious that she got murdered first, and then somebody set her room on fire.
Yeah, the idea was to basically make it seem like an accident.
I mean, I guess if no one reported the fire, or at least the reports were a little late, the killer would have been... I mean, the killer was already successful. He or she was never really identified, but it would have been way more successful, I bet.
Well, I guess if... I mean, I don't even know, because maybe, from the remains, maybe they could always tell what happened to Mikiko.
From the bones?
Yeah, I'm thinking. Maybe they could look at the bones and they could determine from the damage to the bones that Mikiko was in fact murdered and this wasn't an accident. And I don't exactly know where she was found. Was she found in the bathroom?
It was never really indicated where she was found.
Wasn't indicated?
I'm assuming that she was found on the floor.
On the floor, yeah.
But that's pure assumption.
Yeah.
But, and here's the catch. The most disturbing part. Nothing was reported missing, so we know it's not theft. No one just broke in and stole Mikiko's stuff and set it on fire. But her burnt laptop was discovered, and they managed to retrieve it, they managed to make it work, and it was revealed that they found Asian adult content that was accessed around the time that Mikiko was murdered. Someone watched it as she was either getting murdered, or maybe they watched it before she got murdered. But the worst part is that due to the severe heat of the fire, fingerprints or other physical evidence couldn't be recovered. Nothing.
You know, I was thinking that whoever watched it, they probably watched it when Mikiko was already murdered.
That's sick.
Yeah, because there's a line of thinking here that maybe the person who murdered Mikiko, they had
Asian fetish?
Yeah, let's put it like that. And maybe the attack didn't go down in their own brain the way they wanted it to go down, and they had to basically finish the job watching some adult content. I'm also wondering, how did they access Asian adult content in 2002? Because I have no recollection how the internet was. And heck, we didn't even have internet here back in 02. So
02.
I don't even know how you would access that. But I do think that maybe law enforcement looked at the laptop. They saw that the laptop was still operational, and they probably just went to the search history and they just found that, So basically this person goes through the hassle of setting the building on fire to hide their tracks, but they
Forgot to clear out the history.
forgot to clear out the history, or maybe they did, and some, more details, forensics were able to uncover the search history. Obviously, we can't know for sure, but it's interesting.
Or
Why would they do that?
Or maybe they just got arrogant. Maybe they thought the fire would remove or burn down every single thing, including the laptop. Because why would you even bother? You already did your job. You just need to get rid of all of the evidence, set it on fire, forget about it.
This detail about the Asian adult content being accessed is the only detail that we know about the killer. That's the only thing that we could kind of build any kind of profile about this person.
Is it bad if I say like all of the information that we have right now point out to the fact, maybe it's not even a fact, that the culprit was a man?
Oh, I think it's pretty obvious, in my opinion.
Yeah, I just didn't want to say it because maybe it sounds really bad.
No, it
like
doesn't.
the broken larynx.
No, I think it's pretty obvious that it was a guy who committed the crime here. But I'm also, now that we know that Asian adult content was accessed, you have to start thinking, would another Asian person, another Asian man, go looking at... Obviously, they would. But I'm thinking, what's more likely that a, let's say, not Asian culprit looks at Asian adult content?
Or saying something about a racial...
Yeah, I'm thinking about, can we gauge the person? Obviously, I don't think we can for a fact, but I'm thinking there could be a chance that maybe this is someone who's not Asian, but they have a Asian fetish, and they attack Mikiko because she's Japanese, and now afterwards they noticed that the whole thing didn't go according to plan or whatever. They go back and watch that Asian adult content. That's
or
what
maybe
I'm
they
thinking.
watched first. Maybe Mikiko was out a little bit. Because there were no reports of her like leaving. Yeah, there were no reports of her leaving. Maybe she was, I don't know, cleaning up outside a little bit, and then the culprit, whoever he was, went inside her room, snuck in, watched a little bit of Asian adult content, and then Mikiko went in and just...
That's a good point.
Did the crime?
Yeah, I guess that's also a possibility. That's a good point.
I'm always assuming that whoever that culprit was, he's probably way bigger or taller or like bulkier, whatever, than Mikiko, mainly because of the broken larynx. Someone Mikiko's height or size or someone close to her body weight or body height probably could not break her larynx bone. Someone stronger.
I think someone way bigger who
Yeah.
would overpower Mikiko. I think that's fair to say.
Strong enough to break her bones.
Yeah, definitely. It has to be a man. The only explanation here is that it's a man who came in sometime after the party was over, either by knocking on the door and Mikiko opening the door, and maybe Mikiko knew this person and she didn't feel threatened until he attacked her.
True.
Or maybe this person broke into her room at night after the party, and then they murdered Mikiko. But now the question is, who is this person?
No, I have another question actually.
All right.
Do you think it's only one person or two or more?
That's a very good question. And I guess there's no way of saying. It could be multiple perpetrators. What do you think?
Yeah, someone could have set the room on fire. The other could have, I don't know. I do think it could be just one.
You think it's just one?
Yeah, one guy, one man who's a lot bigger than Mikiko. Could have easily overpowered her and just did the crime and set the place on fire.
I think it could be either way. I think it could be two culprits also.
That's true, actually. Thinking about it, it could easily be two.
All right. So, do you have more details about what happened next, or what was the response from the investigators?
Actually, that's all I have. Yeah, that's all I have.
The one thing that I wanted to touch upon, and I was thinking maybe you had it in the notes, and I know you know about this detail, is that it was basically December 14th. It was the Friday, and a lot of the students, the foreign exchange students, they were flying back home to their countries for winter break. And I think, okay, so 14th of December 2002, it was a Friday.
Yeah, it's probably the beginning of a Christmas season, Christmas break.
Exactly. So a lot of the people who were at the party, they left.
On
for
the same day, probably. Same morning.
Same morning, they left. And that was very suspicious. Well, I think it's not suspicious.
No, I don't think so. I think it's part of like the university culture.
Yeah, it's part of what they do. But it was also interesting to me because could one of the people from the party, an Asian man who was there, could that person came back to Mikiko's apartment after the party was over and assaulted her? I think it's a possibility that cannot be denied.
Yeah, definitely a possibility. Although, I don't think that students leaving for their hometowns to take a break is weird. I do think it's just normal. However, it's very unfortunate. It did not help the case at all.
Yeah, but we do have information that law enforcement, according to a newspaper from back in the day, we have a little snippet here that says that we're still in a holding pattern. Police Lieutenant Mike Rosas told the media. He said, we've interviewed all the students who had been gone for the holidays. We've not gained anything new. I think this is interesting because now we know that law enforcement were able to talk to everyone who were at Mikiko's place. So, you would have to think that these 20-something college students would probably crack under pressure.
Definitely, yeah.
If they were questioned thoroughly by law enforcement. So maybe it was someone not.
I don't think the culprit was ever even in the radar. Like, I honestly think no one in that party knew who the culprit was. Because from the way the investigators mentioned, or at least from the way some article mentioned that there were so many binders of information that that weren't received or like released in public, I really don't think whoever the culprit was in that party, or the circle of friends knew, because I don't know, he probably would have been interviewed.
No, I think they could have been interviewed.
They just didn't crack?
I just think that maybe there's a chance that maybe it was someone who was not at the party. I'm also thinking that I'm thinking that it could have been definitely someone who knew Mikiko. But
Yeah, but I don't think it's someone who knew her well enough to be, I don't know, interviewed by the police. Because if it's like maybe a very close friend and they would have found this person as a contact, they probably would have interviewed him. I'm assuming it's like an acquaintance. They probably shared a class or something. This person developed an unhealthy obsession with Mikiko.
I think law enforcement, it doesn't mean that, if you get interviewed, you immediately get caught.
No,
I think there was a chance. No, but I think there was a chance that they talked to the culprit.
You think so?
Yeah. Why do you think it's not the case?
Nah, I'm just assuming because it's like college kids.
I have some information from click2houston.com, and their article stated that law enforcement said in various reports that there were several people of interest in the case, and while some were eliminated, others remain suspects. So it does seem like law enforcement were focusing on some people that they couldn't really rule out. I'm wondering if anyone from the party is still considered a suspect.
Potentially. Most likely, yeah. I'm curious about who was the last person who left.
That's a good point. Maybe they all left at the same time.
Oh yeah, possibly. It could have been a group.
Okay, so another line of thinking here is that why it would be pretty hard, or maybe not hard, but maybe a little bit inconvenient for someone who was not at the party to basically commit the murder, is that if you were not at the party, how would you be so certain that there is no one else left besides Mikiko?
Unless they're stalking them.
But I've looked at the apartment building. I don't know. I mean, it doesn't seem like it's super obvious, like to know how many people are at the apartment.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of a strange thing to me. I think maybe what could have happened is that a person came in, knocked on the door, and Mikiko opened the door. Maybe it was someone who noticed that Mikiko was alone, or maybe it was a situation where that person came into Mikiko's place, saw that she was alone, and then that person tried to advance on Mikiko in a sexual manner, and then Mikiko resisted, and that's when she was murdered by this killer.
I'm curious about the neighbors though. Did anyone hear a thing? The next door neighbors.
That's a very good point. Another thing I would like to say, I don't think it was any of the neighbors, because when we talk about the terrace apartments in Seguin, this is where Mikiko was living at the time of her murder. So it's basically 2 rows of apartment buildings, and each row has 3 buildings. So it's 3 buildings on row number 1 and 3 buildings on row number 2. There are basically just grass fields in every direction. So it almost seems like these apartment buildings were just like laid on the ground like that in a random plot of land.
I don't know. I first saw it from the pictures. I thought it was in the middle of nowhere, and I was so surprised that it was so close to the actual university.
Exactly. But what I was going to say is that I don't think it was anyone from the apartment complex who murdered Mikiko, because why would you then burn down your own apartment complex? Like, you're
That's
risking your own
true.
private property. So I'm thinking it's probably not someone who was living there. So, but you never know.
Do you think it could have been a local? What I meant to say is that someone living nearby.
I definitely think it could have been a local. I think it's a very high chance that it was a local. I'm actually even thinking that this could have been a local who was aware about Mikiko. They must have known Mikiko somehow. Either they were also attending the Lutheran University and they were stalking Mikiko.
Yeah, I also had the sense of like stalking.
And I do think that maybe there's a chance that they knew that Mikiko was gonna fly out. And I don't even know if Mikiko was gonna return. I don't know if it was mentioned.
It's a fall semester, so perhaps most likely because graduations are always held at the end of the spring semester, right?
Yeah, usually. So I'm thinking maybe this person knew that Mikiko was leaving for the holidays. They wanted to go see Mikiko and make an advance. And then things
Just
turned
progressed.
dark.
Yeah.
Someone
Very
who
good
had
point.
someone who had Asian fetish, and I'm somehow thinking that this person was not Asian themselves, and I do think that this person was from Seguin, or maybe not a foreigner, someone who maybe
Like a local.
yeah, but obviously we could just be talking complete nonsense for
Yeah.
all we know. So this is just what I'm thinking right now. But it could be a completely another way around. It could have been one of those Asian students who flew to Asia
True.
the next day. It could have been anyone. We have no suspects. We have nothing. Just pure speculation in Mikiko Kasahara's case. And it's so sad because it's been 22 years, and all we know about the killer is that they accessed at some point Asian adult content, and that's the only thing that we know about
It's
this
really
suspect.
creepy. Like that information alone, immediately, whoever was the culprit, a creepy dude probably, even before the murders.
And it's so strange because 2002, I guess they didn't have any CCTV security cameras back then.
No, I doubt it.
I mean,
even
but they
doubt it's
should.
probably way harder to access adult content
Back in the day?
back in
I
2002.
think so. Oh yeah, definitely.
So whoever killed her watched Asian adult content, actually put an effort in trying to find those.
But you know, Trevor Dealey's case, if you remember, this was a guy who
Trevor
went.
Dealey.
It's a guy who went missing in Ireland.
Oh yeah, the one with the CCTV footage.
Yeah, and that happened in the 90s. I think that happened even, if I'm not mistaken, it even happened prior to Mikiko's murder. So I'm thinking there were, but then again, that's Dublin. So obviously you have more cameras in Dublin. So I think
That's a major city.
I'm just saying that it's really lucky for this culprit to just avoid the detection. And it seems like neighbors, no one didn't see anyone. No one noticed anything. Very bad.
Yeah, so this actually leads me to believe that it could have been a student. Or at least not like an older dude that would raise suspicions like why is he around this area,
Yeah, that's a good point.
right?
So someone who blended in with the students,
Yeah.
not oddball, not like a middle-aged man who's just hanging out with a bunch of young students. You know,
Yeah, that's true.
It's yeah, that's a good point. But honestly, it could have been anyone.
True.
At this point, I think it's just pure speculation. And there's nothing new about this case. I tried finding some
It's been
information.
22 years and absolutely nothing.
Nothing, yeah. I hope they're reopening the case. I hope they're working on it.
I'm still curious about the persons of interest that are not ruled out. It's been 22 years.
Yeah, probably someone who law enforcement couldn't rule out, but maybe didn't have enough evidence.
Yeah, that's true, actually.
All right. I think,
That's all we have for this case,
yeah, the
honestly.
course of this podcast episode has concluded. I think it's good. We're back. I want to say something off topic. I'm glad we recorded today because I'm probably going to try to post this tomorrow. So it's probably going to come out on the 15th of August. So it's nice because I woke up today in the morning. I was not thinking I would be recording a podcast.
You sounded, honestly, when we saw each other in the morning, you didn't sound well enough to record.
Yeah. And I just somehow was thinking, you know what, let's try it. And I'm glad. That means that we can get back on track. We have another case that we want to talk about soon. So we're going to do that as well. But for Mikiko Kasahara's case, all I'm going to say is it's unfortunate.
Extremely.
And I would like to know what the listeners of this podcast think about Mikiko's case. You could always go to our YouTube channel, Weeknight Mysteries Podcast on YouTube, and leave a comment under this latest podcast episode, and we will always read them.
Yeah, we'd always love to hear from
maybe
you.
you have some more information. Maybe even someone from Seguin, Texas, who knows some more details.
Yeah.
That would be great. Thank you guys for listening, and we will see you on the next podcast episode, hopefully also in a couple of days. Thank you for listening.
Bye.
Bye.